The War in the West, A New History, Volume 2, The Allies Fight Back, 1941 to 1943, by James Holland, read by Leighton Pugh. Note on the text. I am very conscious that the narrative in this book is repeatedly switching from one perspective to another, from British to German, and from French to Italian, and then to American, and even Belgian and Norwegian. In an effort to help distinguish who is who, I have written ranks in the language of the respective nationality. Thus it is Captain McIntyre, but Capitaine Frenet, and Major General Kennedy, but Generalmajor Rommel. The aim is not to be pretentious, but rather just to help with the flow of the narrative. I have applied this rule somewhat inconsistently to military units too. As a rough rule of thumb, any unit of corps or above in size has been similarly written in the vernacular, but there are also a few other examples of using German words, especially. Luftwaffe squadrons are Staffeln, because actually a German Staffel was not quite the same as a British squadron. German paratroopers and mountain troops are written as Fallschirmjäger and Gebirgsjäger, which will certainly help lessen any confusion by the time I reach Volume 3 and D-Day, for example, where there were German, American, Polish, Canadian and French airborne troops all operating, and in the case of Americans, Poles and Germans, often with similar-sounding surnames. I should also explain how some military units were written. A corps is numbered in Roman numerals and a military operation in uppercase. Luftwaffe Gruppen were written in Roman numerals, but Staffeln in Arabic numbering. There were 3 Staffeln per Gruppe, so Staffel 5, Jagdgeschwader or JG2, for example, would be in Gruppe 2, JG2, but Staffel 7, JG2 would be in Gruppe 3, JG2. Introduction. June 1941 was a momentous month in world history. At its start, Nazi Germany was at war with Britain and her dominions, but all her other enemies had been subdued in what had been an astonishing run of victories. First Poland in September 1939, then Denmark and Norway in April the following year. Then the Low Countries and even mighty France had been crushed. France had been overrun in just 6 weeks. A generation earlier, French troops had resisted every German assault for 4 years, but in May 1940, the outcome had been effectively decided in a matter of days. Britain, that island nation hanging off the edge of continental Europe, had managed to hold out, but there were not many people around the world who questioned Germany's supremacy or who doubted that Britain would eventually be subdued too. In the meantime, first Yugoslavia and then Greece had also been overrun with clinical and ruthless efficiency, and then in May 1941, so too had Crete, the largest island in the Aegean. The British had been forced into their 3rd large-scale evacuation of the war, another humiliating defeat. So it was that by the start of June 1941, only Britain remained, holding out against this seemingly unstoppable military machine. In Germany and on newsreels around the world, it was pictures of columns of panzers and swastikas rising over the Parthenon in Athens that dominated. America, it was clear, had the potential to produce large amounts of arms, but potential was one thing, and reality was another. Certainly not a huge volume of war materiel was yet emerging from US factories, for all the British insistence that it soon would. Britain's failure on land suggested that here was a global power that was past its prime. Trouble had been brewing throughout much of its empire in the 1930s, and its democracy and so-called liberal values were looking rather limp in the face of the dictators. Liberalism, the Nazis were shouting from the rooftops, meant weakness. As the British forces on Crete tramped south through the mountains and escaped on their ships, it seemed to much of the world that the Nazis were right. Nationalism and militarism appeared to be the dominant forces in the Western world in this second summer of war. On the face of it, this was understandable enough. The notion that Germany was an unstoppable military machine in those first years of war is something that still holds sway to this day. War is understood to
Sample complete. Ready to continue?